Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's broadcast of the Marin Symphony at Home. You may have noticed that, speaking of home, my background has changed since we last talked to each other. And I am outdoors in the beautiful town of Sun Valley, where I'm up for the Sun Valley Music Festival. More on that score in the future. But for now, I am joined by the longtime principal clarinet of the Marin Symphony, Art Austin. Art, it's a pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you, Alasdair. Pleasure to be here.
Now, you've been principal clarinet of the Marin Symphony since 1977, is that correct?
That's correct.
So you would have played for my predecessor in the role of music director, Sandor Salgo, way back in the day. Is that correct? You auditioned for him?
Yes, Hungarian. He played in a Hungarian string quartet, and he took everything more 18th, 19th century. He had slower tempos, and he was quite a character. He, if he really liked you, he would call you his first-class angel. And if he liked the way you performed, he would take his white handkerchief and wave it in front of your solo or something, kind of like Luciano Pavarotti. If you ever saw him perform, I saw him. Yeah. So
did he do that while the piece was happening in concert, or was this afterwards?
No, this was rehearsals. Yeah, during performance.
Just wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would have auditioned for him, a solo, or how did that work?
It was a different kind of audition. They were looking for a principal clarinet. I was new to the Bay Area. I'd been principal clarinet in Kansas City, but I didn't like the Midwest. So go West, young man was my idea, as many people came to, and the Bay Area I really liked. So they were looking for a principal clarinet. And, nowadays we have auditions behind screens and committees, and then Alasdair, you have the final say-so. But back in 1977, Marin Symphony was half professional ringers and then half amateurs. So they were looking for a principal clarinet, and Salgo called me and said, well, would you be so kind, my dear, to come play the Dvorak 8th Symphony, and we will also be doing Beethoven's 9th Symphony. And I said, well, sure, I've done both of those. I'd be happy to come play. Very informal. And after I played, he said, well, would you be willing to play with us as principal clarinet? And I said, sure. And he also said, and I have a broken down orchestra in Modesto. Would you also be so kind as to come play with us in Modesto? And believe me, it was a broken down orchestra. So I started out with those two symphonies right when I first moved to, I first lived in the Haight-Ashbury. But I went
back in 1977. That must have been quite a scene.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which I certainly explored, but I won't go into that.
Perhaps not. Let's go into explore a little bit more how you came to the clarinet in the first place.
Oh, well, this is a very interesting story. I come from a musical family. My father was a violinist, and my mother played viola. I'm an only child. So I grew up hearing them practice, Sinfonia Concertante, heard them playing string quartets. And in third grade, there was a man who came around to the school, with a tonette, kind of like a recorder. I don't know if you ever saw those. And he says, well, how would each of you like to try this? And he came to me and I said, sure. So I picked it up and I played Capriccio Spaniel. And he called up my dad and he says, Mr. Austin, I think your son might have some musical talent. So immediately I began studying. Well, my dad, he was a string man, but he had, in those days, had to teach band. So he had a trumpet, a flute, and a clarinet in the closet. And I tried the trumpet, and, the buzzing tickled the lips. I didn't like. Then I tried the flute. Everybody says the flute is so easy to get a sound, like a pop bottle. I couldn't get a sound. And then there was a clarinet. Boom, right off the bat. I just naturally took to it. So my dad got me taking lessons. I had a great teacher, Dr. Earl Uhas, a Juilliard graduate who taught at Colorado College in Colorado Springs. And when I was about 9, I played for women's clubs. I'd only been playing the clarinet for a year. And then when I was 11, I played the Mozart Clarinet Concerto with the Colorado Springs Symphony.
That's stop you there, but that's a pretty steep learning curve. I mean, 2 years into playing the clarinet, you were playing the Mozart Clarinet Concerto. That's
3 years.
Well, okay, 3, but still.
Yeah. I mean, performing, yes.
Yeah. So this was a good fit for you.
You could easily say I was a child prodigy because I didn't, it was just easy. There was no, nothing to it.
Well, I wouldn't say there's nothing to the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, but you certainly made it look easy.
Sure.
But you were clearly gifted because your main schooling took place at the famous Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. How was that experience for you?
Well, Curtis is an incredible school. Rudolf Serkin was the director in those days, and we got to do chamber music with them. So I did the Mozart Clarinet Trio with Serkin on piano, Michael Tree on viola of the Guarneri String Quartet, and myself. And it was wonderful. Serkin had a very, a very German approach, and Michael Tree was more romantic. He wanted to go da yabba dabba dee da da da. And so for me to see the two of them talking about these different styles was really something. And another great thing about Curtis was that every Saturday morning, whoever was conducting the Philadelphia Orchestra that week would come and conduct us. So I got to play with Leonard Bernstein, Claudio Abbado, Istvan Kertész, who's the Pierre Boulez, Eugene Ormandy, all these wonderful conductors. So that was a treat at Curtis.
What an amazing experience to have all of those legendary figures as part of your musical upbringing,
yes.
As well as chamber music experience with Mozart.
Well, chamber music has always been a great love of mine. I was fortunate to go to the Marlborough Music Festival, which on the East Coast is very prestigious, and got to play in the Grand Partita with Richard Stoltzman was playing principal. He was filling in for Harold Wright, and I was playing second. And we had Frank Cohen. He was in the Cleveland Orchestra playing first basset horn. And I forget who was playing second basset horn, but Frank Cohen, he was able to make his clarinet sound like a basset horn. He had this big kind of woofy sound, and he was perfect for it. But that was a treat. And also, I right before I graduated Curtis, my teacher Anthony Gigliotti of the Philadelphia Orchestra suggested I take some voice lessons. So I said, okay. And I had a girlfriend, Maria de Palma. I like the Italians. And she was living with Madame Gregory. Now, Madame Gregory taught voice at Curtis for 30, 40 years. She had students like Anna Maffo, Frank Guerrera. And so I went and had lessons with her. And my third lesson, she says, Arthur, you have a voice. And I said, really? She says, I will talk to Serkin and we will get you in as a voice student. And I said, well, fabulous. I've always loved to sing. And so I was all set, that was at the end of graduation. I went to Marlborough, and then I came back and they were having auditions for Kansas City Philharmonic. I was 20, I was young. And I was all set to be a voice student. So I went and took this audition in New York City, took the Metroliner up, and, I was so calm. There was no nerves because I could have cared less if I had
nothing to lose, right? It's sometimes when you play your best, you think, well, what the hell? Let's just do this.
Right. So I went and I auditioned, and they liked me. And then I left. I said, well, I'm going back to Philadelphia. And they said, well, where can we reach you? I said, well, here's my phone number. So they called me up, a few days later and says, well, you're one of the finalists. Could you come back and play for us? And that audition was two conductors, Maurice Perez and James Paul. In those days, they were good conductors. And so I get to the audition a little late. And the other two, there were only three finalists. The other two guys were scrambling, practicing frenetically. And I walk in and they said, well, who would like to go first? I said, oh, I will. And he says, well, don't you need to warm up? And I said, no. So, so I just walked in, took a readout, put it on the clarinet, and played the first cadenza from the Nielsen Clarinet Concerto. And they said, well, that was very nice. And they said, well, can you do Midsummer Night's Dream Scherzo? And I said, well, sure. And, you know, that was, everybody had to do that stuff in those days, and they still do. And they wanted to hear something lyrical, so I played Brahms first. And 3 excerpts, they said, well, that's fine, thank you. And, you know, they called me a few days later and said, well, we want to offer you the job. I said, really? And I thought to myself, crossroads. Do I go back and study voice, or do I do what I was trained for? So I decided to go to Kansas City, yeah.
And then eventually you found your way to the West Coast in the Marin Symphony.
Yes, yes. Yes,
you were
I
mentioning
did.
a minute ago some of the chamber music repertoire, of course, is beautiful chamber repertoire for the clarinet, but also a handful of wonderful concertos. And I know that back in 1997, I think, or 96, that you played the Copland Clarinet Concerto, wonderful, wonderful piece with the Marin Symphony. Tell us about that.
Well, this is a very interesting story. I was living in the San Ynez Valley at that time, which is, you know, down just over the mountain from Santa Barbara. And we were in Buellton. And Buellton is home of Anderson green pea soup. So at any rate, we were caretakers on a ranch. And we were down where our apartment was above a barn. It was very moldy and, you know, a lot of animal fur. And, you know, I had asthma, you know, so I started to have a bad time. So on New Year's, I decided to take myself to the emergency room. And they said, well, very good. Yes, you definitely have pneumonia. They gave me 2 shots of adrenaline, and that helped. But my first rehearsal of the Copland Clarinet Concerto was about 2 weeks later. And so, you know, I came up and my lungs were functioning at about 80%, which is not ideal for a wind player, but there were no nerves. I mean, because I didn't have the energy for nerves. So now get this, I played the concerto 5 times. I played it in a rehearsal. I played it at a concert, 2 concerts with the symphony. Gary Sheldon wanted me to come play at the Jewish Community Center. So we had a rehearsal in the morning, and he said, well, and we'll do the performance in the afternoon. I said, fine. So we did that. And he says, oh, by the way, we have another audience. Would you mind doing it again a second time? And I said, are you kidding?
Oh my God.
So I certainly had it under, you know, under my it was very
finger.
much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fingers, concept, you name it. Yeah.
What a way to recover from pneumonia.
Yeah.
Hey, Art,
Yeah.
it's so good. It's so good to talk to you. Gosh, I think we could happily chat for the rest of the afternoon. But as you can probably see from my picture, they don't call it Sun Valley for nothing. And
Yes.
the sun appeared, and I know that I have 2 skin tones: lily white and lobster red, and
Yes.
nothing in the middle. So if I don't get my way out of the sun sometime soon, you know which color I'm going to turn.
Yeah, you're red, white, and yellow from what I see.
Right, a combination of those, and the red factor is going to increase rapidly, and unless I either get out of the sun or put on some sunblock. But listen, it's great to chat with you. I so wish that we could be making music right now and in the near future, but it's going to be a little bit of time before that happens.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to that enormously.
Me too.
But in the meantime, thank you so much for sharing some of your life stories. It's been great to get a window into your experiences, and congratulations on, I now can't remember, I said 1977, what's the math on that? Something like
43 years, almost
43
44 years.
Well,
This fall, it'll be 44 years, yeah.
congratulations.
And you know, the Marin Symphony was begun in 1952, which was the year I was born. So I kind of felt like I was destined to play in the Marin Symphony.
Absolutely. Well, we're so very grateful for all of your years of music making, and we look forward to more to come.
Me
so thank
too.
you, and see you soon.
All right, Alasdair. Have a great summer.
Thank you. You too.
All
Bye-bye.
righty. Bye.